The following stories are all from the Reddit r/skinwalkers and are all supposedly true. Let me know if you have experienced anything like this in the comments below. This happened to me in January of 2019 in western North Carolina around the small town of Silver. I was participating in a week-long program to get certified as a first responder for the Wilderness First Aid and Rescue. I'm studying to become a forester, and it is important to know how to keep people alive in the woods when things go wrong. There are two primary locations in the complex, a classroom with some bathrooms, and a kitchen where we spent most of the day in class and ate meals, and a group of one-room cabins on top of a steep hill directly north of the classroom where we would sleep. An important thing to note about the cabins is the heating system. Each cabin has a small but powerful radiator in it that makes the cabin feel like a sauna if left on for too long. Since it was January in the Appalachians, it was pretty chilly outside at night, so the heat was needed. In order to strike a balance between boiling in our beds and getting hypothermia, we would turn on the radiator and leave a window open so that the warm and cold air could circulate and create a reasonable temperature. Don't get at me about the waste of power. I didn't like it either. The radiator and the open window were at the front of the cabin, next to the door, and my bed was directly across from the window. The incident happened on the 5th day, a Thursday, of my time there. My boyfriend and I, who was enrolled in the program with me, had settled down for the night in the cabin we shared with one other person. We had gone to sleep as normal, and were sleeping soundly on two bunks that we had pushed together so we could sleep next to each other. Sometime during the night, I was woken up by some shuffling on the other side of the room near the window. I heard my boyfriend say in a complaining voice, "Can't we close this window? I wake up feeling frozen." I woke up more and sat up in my bed, groggily, about to answer him, when I heard another voice say, "If we close the window, it'll get too hot and we'll wake up sweaty." I snapped awake and froze where I was sitting. The voice that had responded was my voice. There is something very strange and wrong in hearing your voice repeated back at you. In the dark, I looked down next to me, where I saw my boyfriend sleeping soundly. At this point, a mortal dread had a tight grip on my chest, and I forced myself to not move or even blink. I was focused intently on the place near the window, fearfully anticipating more of my own words. I heard more shuffling outside the window, and my same words were repeated. "If we close the window, it'll get too hot and we'll wake up sweaty." Followed quickly by my boyfriend's voice again. "Can't we close this window? I wake up feeling frozen." Towards the end of the last repetition of my boyfriend's words, there seemed to be an unevenness in the enunciation, like raising and lowering the pitch slightly. I remained frozen in my bed, feeling my hand fall asleep in my propped up position. I sat there for what felt like 15 to 20 minutes, listening to whatever it was shuffle around in front of our window, separated from me by some odd 10 feet and a window mesh. Eventually, the shuffling became more frequent, and a weird mumbling sound came from outside the window, with no real words being said, or none that I could make out. This particular behaviour didn't last long before the shuffling sound moved to the left of the window to the door, where a scratching sound began to manifest. As the sound moved, I saw the silhouette of a medium height, 5'6" figure that moved in an uncanny way, like when a baby animal tries to walk for the first time, but isn't quite strong enough to stand up correctly. It sounded like someone was scraping some dry sticks against the wood of the door, not aggressively, but kind of like an impatient dog asking to be let in. This scratching slowly moved around the cabin, stopping when it reached the wall that I was closest to. My ears were strained to hear anything that might indicate further action, but all I could hear were footsteps on the dry leaves. the footsteps eventually move away from the cabin and down the other side of the hill and didn't return for the rest of the night. I stayed unmoving from my position for at least another half hour before my body readjusted itself slightly, letting blood flow back into my asleep limbs. I was wide awake until my boyfriend's and other roommates' alarms went off some time before dawn to get ready for the day, which felt like maybe 2 hours, but I couldn't be certain because I didn't have a clock. My boyfriend was surprised that I was awake before him, as I am typically a late sleeper, but I just told him his alarm woke me up and tried to act somewhat normal. We got up and got ready for the day, but I refused to leave the cabin until the sun began to peek over the mountains. For the rest of the week, I was on edge, and it felt like there were eyes on me whenever it was relatively dark out, though I am not sure how much of that was raw paranoia. In the day following the incident at night, I had realised the lines that were repeated to me by the voice were a part of a conversation that my boyfriend and I had earlier in the week, and I came to the conclusion that whatever it was had been outside our cabin and heard us talking. This scared me a great deal, as I also realised that it had likely been lurking there in the following nights as well without us realising it, and it might do so again for our remaining nights, though it ended up not coming back. I waited to tell my boyfriend about this until we had left the program because he scares easy and was already a little wary of walking in the woods at night up to the cabins. It should be noted that I know this not to be a sleep paralysis experience, as I have had them before, and they were nothing like this. Not to mention I was able to move. I am posting this here also as a means of asking for advice in addition to getting it off my chest, as this winter I will have to return to the same location to renew my certification. It expires 2 years after acquisition, and I want to know as much as I can so I can hopefully avoid another encounter. I know the entity for which this board is named is pinned on a lot of strange encounters, but I don't have a better idea of what it could be. If there is a similar entity that exists in my area, I'd be glad to hear about it, and what I can do, if anything, to avoid it. I have a story. It isn't mine, but it happened to my uncle. He used to tell this story when we went camping, and it scared the lights out of me every time I heard it. We live in Utah, and my uncle, Mark, went on a mission at 19. They sent him to an Indian reservation in Arizona. They paired him up with a companion named Carl. When they first got there was a huge rift with the locals on the reservation with them being there. They didn't want my uncle and Carl staying on the reservation grounds. Eventually, they came to a compromise that they would stay on the outskirts in a trailer. This reservation wasn't very big and was located next to a heavily wooded area. The first night, they were trying to sleep when all of a sudden their trailer started to shake violently back and forth. Startled and not sure what was happening, they climbed under their table for cover. Mark could distinctly hear someone pushing it from both sides of the trailer, like a group of people. After about 5 minutes, it stopped. The next day, they made rounds on the reservation and were talking to the locals. Carl made a comment to one of the families that their trailer was shaking that night before. The family got very quiet and then told them they had to leave. They thought it was strange, but didn't think much of it. The next night, it happened again. They awoke to their trailer shaking back and forth. Again, they climbed under the table until it stopped. This went on for 2 more nights. Any time they tried to talk to anyone about it, they got quiet and told them to leave. Mark started thinking that due to the tension of their arrival, the locals were doing this to scare them off of the reservation. They then go into a convenience store, and they were talking together about how frustrated they were with the situation. The clerk overheard and said, "They can't talk about it. It's forbidden." Confused, they asked him, "Can't talk about what?" The guy continues to tell them about the skinwalkers. He says they are evil demons that were once Native American witches. If they talk about it, the skinwalkers will come for their souls. They just walked out of there, baffled. They thought it was another scare tactic. So, that night, when the shaking started again, my uncle decided to be brave and confront them. He went to the trailer door, flew it open, and yelled, "Hey!" When he did that, he saw these 3 animals run off. 2 were a wolf, 1 was a bear. But they looked strange, almost with human features. As he watched them run towards the trees, all 3 stood up on 2 legs and walked slowly towards the trees, making a human cackling laugh. It scared him so bad that they called their mission president the next morning and asked to be moved. They were relocated that day, and for a year nothing happened. One day, they announced that Carl was being relocated to another city and Mark was getting a new companion, Jimmy. They had to drive for about an hour to pick Jimmy up for the airport. The road they travelled went through the boundaries of the reservation. They arrived at 8 p.m. and met Jimmy, and they go to leave. The mission president tells Jimmy, "We are driving through a dangerous area at night, so we can't make any stops. If you need to use the restroom, you need to go now." Jimmy says, "I'm fine." The mission president gets serious enough to even freak out Mark. "I'm not kidding. Go and do your business." Jimmy was insistent he was fine, so they hit the road. As they were about 30 minutes into the drive, they were going through the area of the reservation boundaries. Jimmy starts complaining that he needed to pee badly. The mission president says, "We can't stop here. You'll have to hold it." Jimmy keeps going. "Oh, I really can't hold it." So the mission president stops the car and says, "Okay, but you will do your business next to the door, and if I say get into the car, you better get into the car fast." With a look of confusion, Jimmy says, "All right." Opens the door and starts to do his business. About 5 seconds later, the mission president says nothing and just yanks Jimmy into the car and floors it. Jimmy and Mark start freaking out. "What's going on?" The mission president says nothing and just increases his speed. All of a sudden, Mark sees something next to the car, to his right. A giant wolf-looking man was running on 2 feet next to the car. Mark looked at the speedometer. They were going over 60 miles per hour and still increasing. The wolf creature kept right next to the car for 10 minutes until it finally took off into the trees. Shaking, Jimmy gets out of the car when they arrive. They didn't speak through the whole ordeal and says, "What did I just see?" The mission president says, "Next time I tell you to take care of your business, you take care of your business." This started back in January of this year. I live in the Front Range of Colorado, meaning that once the mountains stop, it's basically plains for miles and miles. There are a lot of small roads and strange dead ends around these parts, and one of these is a favourite of me and my friends, as it goes a long way out of the main road, with basically no reason for anyone else to be there. This privacy is great for any variety of teenage shenanigans. Back in January, I was high as shit in the back of my friend's car as we drove down that road, hoping to park at the end so we could smoke more. As I was staring out of the window, I swore I could see the silhouette of a tall, strangely proportioned person running alongside our car. It was far out in the field, and I convinced myself it was just my inebriated mind playing tricks on me so that I wouldn't freak out. And I didn't tell my friends, so it wouldn't bother them. We parked there for a few hours, lights off, and then went home with nothing else amiss. This actually makes me want to die now. Tonight, I was headed back out to that spot with my girlfriend, both of us in separate cars. My drive up was pretty uneventful, but there was some fog that made it pretty spooky. Once we parked, my girlfriend hopped into my car and was obviously super freaked out. Once I got her to calm down, she told me what had happened. On the drive up, she had looked out her window and seen a tall, dark figure, exactly like what I had seen 11 months ago. But this time it was just standing there, staring. As soon as she made eye contact with it, her car radio turned to static. She pretty quickly turned it off and hauled ass to meet up with me. I cannot stress enough how little she believes in the supernatural, so seeing her as freaked out as she was definitely left me a little uneasy. I helped calm her down and then hopped out of the car to take a piss. I know, literally the stupidest move ever, but at the time I hadn't remembered what had happened to me previously, and also I really had to pee. While I was out there, I definitely felt like something was watching me, but I'm generally an anxious person, so I brushed it off, as I was only going to be out there for like 30 seconds. When I stood up and went back to my room, my girlfriend looked absolutely terrified, and she was staring over my shoulder, not at me. My first thought wasn't anything supernatural. We're both girls, so I assumed some creepy rapist had crawled out of the grass and was standing right behind me, waiting to hurt us. When I tell you I flew into the driver's seat, I really mean it. My flight reflex 100% took over. Once I slammed the door, I looked over to her and yelled, "What?" As far as I could tell, there wasn't anyone there. She told me that she heard faint female voices coming from the grass, exactly like ours. We were in an open plain, so there was no way it was our echoes. Whatever was out there was mimicking us. The mimicry is what did it for me, and I knew we had to leave ASAP, especially as I had deciphered my hazy memories of the last time I saw whatever it was. I didn't tell my girlfriend exactly what was wrong, just turned around so my headlights were on her car so she could get there quickly. Once we were safely away, I called her and told her my thoughts. We're both pretty spooked right now, obviously. What are your thoughts on this? What do you think it was?
Hello listeners, if you enjoyed this story, please check out the author in the description. For more content, leave a like, comment, and subscribe for more sinister readings.